Well, it's a great privilege today to welcome a guest to be in conversation with someone. If I was to communicate all of the different accolades and achievements of this amazing guy, we wouldn't have time to record the episode. But all I will say, I'm being invited today to share with Billboard's top new gospel artist of last year, multi-platinum recording artist, and historic, I believe, 5-time Grammy nominee, Dante Bowe. Dante, welcome to the show. How are you? Where are you coming in from?
Thank you so much for having me. That was the introduction. Thank you so much. I am coming from, I'm in New York right now. So this is
Awesome.
Yeah. But I live in Nashville. So
the home of music. Beautiful. How's the last 2 years been for you, Dante? I mean, every guest we've had has got their own story. Every guest has had their own experience. Talk me through how COVID pandemic life has been for you, how it shifted and shaped the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's shaped so much just because also my assistant is in the restroom and he's showering and is making a lot of noise. So anyway, but it's shaped my career just, I think, because when I came into music, it was like 2019. And so 2020 happened immediately. And it was my first tour. It was supposed to be my first album and all these different things. And I remember, even losing my grandfather and having to work through grief and working on music at the same time. It was just a really challenging time for me. But, God got us all through that. And it's still getting us through that because I'm sure like a lot of people have lost their loved ones as well. But my music was one of the therapies in that season. And I wrote my album Circles and Joyful in that not so joyful season. But it was definitely a challenging time, but for everybody, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I never want to presume people know who our guests are. I'm pretty certain most will have heard of you, would have at least sung or heard a song of yours. But could you tell us a little bit about your journey and your story, where you come from, where you've been, and kind of what's brought you to where you are now? Because yes, we have a multi-Grammy nominee singer-songwriter with us, but I'm sure there's a story behind the glory, as they say.
Yeah, it's a long story too, but for time's sake, I was raised in Rockingham, North Carolina. It's a small town, super small. I don't even know if anybody, most people are like, we've never heard of it, but Rockingham, North Carolina. And I love that place because it just bred me, honestly. And I mean, that's where I met God. And my grandparents on both sides, they were preachers and they did Bible studies and they were like leading the church. You know what I mean? My grandmothers on both sides. And so my parents weren't Christian at the time, and I didn't know until I was 16, but they sold drugs to take care of me and my brother, even though they were amazing parents, super present, always showing up for everything. It was just, they did that. So they thought that it would give us a better life than what they had growing up. And they were young parents and all the whole thing. And at 16 years old, I had an encounter with God in my bedroom because I was dyslexic. And I used to always complain to God about that. And I remember, worshiping in my room, crying, and technically like just sleeping on, like passing out, like worshiping and crying, like, and was saved. I considered that my salvation story. I think that's when I first committed my life to God. I think before then it was more so through my grandparents, and it was like what the family would want. And then, that was the moment for me where it was personal and it was just me and God. And Jesus became everything at that moment. And he also healed me from dyslexia. And I remember going into the living room because I told God if I could read the KJV Bible, because it's all I used to read because my grandparents only read KJV. It was like any other version was a sin. And so like, yeah, it's like if it didn't sound like Greek or holy, it's like that's the same. No, but I would read the KJV Bible, and I could read it, and it was very, very scary for me because I was like, wait, am I just tricking myself?
Yeah.
I was like, did I just fool myself and thinking I was dyslexic? And like, I'm trying harder now. But yeah, I was healed, and I read to my mom, and she was saved through that. And my dad, later on in life met God. But I started traveling with Eddie James
Mm.
right after high school, like right after this encounter. I went to travel with Eddie James, and I did a bunch of missions work, in the Philippines, in Europe, and like all these different places. And started singing, leading worship constantly, and like growing in my craft, and writing a bunch of songs that Eddie would just be like, these are not good songs. But like I would pitch Eddie
Right.
songs all the time. Like I was like this 19-year-old, like I would write anyway, it was so funny. I would write him all these songs, and he was like, these aren't good songs yet. But he was one of the people, the key leaders that helped me grow as a singer-songwriter in the faith. You know what I mean? And like my theology and what I believed, and like make sure I'm singing what I believe, and all these different things like that. And yeah, I would say like right after I left, I stayed there for 6 years, all throughout technically throughout my early 20s.
Yeah.
And then mid 20s is when I signed my record deal with Bethel Music. And it wasn't just like that. Obviously, I wrote a bunch of songs, and like met people, and like
Yeah.
connected, and like I ended up, I mean, no one was calling me at one point, and then like, because I was homeless actually. And so after leaving Eddie James, it's like, where do I go? What do I do? How do I get there? You know what I mean? And I'm just staying on a friend's couch for like almost a year,
Wow.
like homeless, like having all my clothes in my car, could hardly afford like Chick-fil-A. Like literally, I was like, man, what am I gonna eat? But they
Right.
were always gracious. I didn't want to ask for anything. But anyway, my point is, after that homeless state, God ended up opening doors, and I only accredit that to God because I don't know what happened in that in between. I do a lot of interviews, and
Yeah.
I just don't know what happened from being homeless to like randomly every record label in Christian music called me. Every single, like before I signed my deal at Bethel, like most every record label had already contacted me in our genre. And that was just so profound. And it was just all God. The Grammys are God. Like it's just all, I don't shake hands. I don't know who to meet or who to like talk to or any of that stuff. Like I'm such an introvert when I go places.
I
It's like God has to be my PR. So
I love that. Now, this is going to encourage loads of people because as a snapshot, people might look at Dante Bowe and think, "Oh, immediate elevation." But what you've just described is like an incremental process. And I always say there's no shortcut to suddenly. There's no way you just see someone and they've learned how to write a song, and the next minute they're putting out albums. So, would you say that that time of preparation built an infrastructure, or say a foundation in you, that's enabled you to carry the weight of the influence you have now, but also all the opportunities? I mean, there are only 7 days in a week. How do you decide what to prioritize and how to live by priorities and not by pressures?
yeah, I mean, I think being and I don't know if you ever heard of Eddie James. Have you?
No, I hadn't. I hadn't
A
before.
singer
I've seen you in
songwriter, but
other
he's also
interviews.
just a good, like just a mentor in the faith.
Yeah.
But being there for 6 years, I mean, I worked with, we had a ministry called Dream Life, and it was like drug addicts and like people that came from perverse lifestyles and like all these different things. And I think just being there really humbled me and taught me like the heart of Jesus, and like getting in the dirt, like God sent his son to walk in the dirt. You know what I mean? And I think it's more of a principle than it is what he needed to do that. You know what I mean? I think he wanted to
Yeah.
show us like this is how we are called to live. And we're called to live low and like super, like, you know what I mean? And I think that keeps the pressures and all the weird stuff like away. When you have that mentality, like I'm called to people, I'm called to Jesus, and like I don't have to do like all the things that people kind of put on you, just like, you know what I mean? It's like I
Yeah.
can do this, in a way that's, I live by principle and not by like, my own emotions, or like being tossed to and fro, like what, feeling one way and then another way. You know what I mean? And I think being there, being with those people, and like, I mean, growing with people that I guess were thrown out, you know what I mean, helped me really develop a heart, like not like I got the heart of Jesus, but I do, you know what I mean? It helped me
Yeah.
develop a heart for him and his people. And I think that's how you keep the pressures and all that stuff kind of like
I
distant.
love I love that answer. We had Carrie Job on the show a couple of months ago, and we had this whole conversation around anointing versus gifting, and we were kind of saying, in many ways, what you do, you can't fake or blag the anointing or an anointed song, can you? It's either there, there's either something on it, or there isn't. So as you push away the distractions and other people's opinions and reviews of the songs and all the awards and accolades, can you share a little bit with our viewers about your, I guess, private devotion and private discipline with God, and any tips for potential songwriters, worship leaders, how to press into a verse or a lyric or a phrase that could one day be a song that will impact people?
I could tell you, but it wouldn't be private. No, I'm just kidding. It
You
wouldn't
got
be
me.
private
You got
anymore.
me. You
It
got
wouldn't
me.
be alone time anymore. No, but like bring the world into your closet with Jesus. No, honestly, it looks different every single day. I walk with him. I walk with him. Like I wake up and I talk to God. He's everything to me. You know what I mean? And throughout the day, like I'm doing all these fashion shows here, and like praying before I walk in any show, praying, like talking to him and having constant communication. If I'm like washing the dishes, if I am, even if I'm watching Netflix or something and I see
Yeah.
something that inspires me, I automatically equate that to God encounter. Anything good comes from God. And that's my perception on life. And I think writing good songs just starts with gratitude and doing anything good. Being anything like Jesus starts with gratitude. I like the scripture that says, I will enter your gates with thanksgiving and into your courts with praise. And I'm sorry.
No, man, you go. You
I'm just, we've been praying so much while we've been here. So I'm like super emotional. All right. Anyway,
no, man, I love it. Could just be you. Be you.
but my private time with God is, and I actually do usually tell interviewers like it wouldn't be private. I'd never answer it, but it's my first time. But like it's just it's a constant every day with him, because I've been through like so much,
Yeah.
and we all have, right? But it's like he's been such a lifeline and like such a constant that I can't even limit it to like an hour here or like an hour. I have to do life with the Lord. And even at midnight, if I'm like I am thinking about him constantly and wanting to be, in his will all the time. Because sometimes even in music, right? I'm getting off topic, but sometimes in music, like we do these things, we want to be different, and everyone can say, oh no, I don't, like it's all about, it's like, no, like we want to do stuff that's different and innovative, and like we want to change the world through our message, and like, we know there's a billion other artists, but we want to kind of stand out in that thing. And I don't ever want to get caught up in trying to be different, trying to write the best songs and trying to have the best performances outside of the will of God. And so it's always going to be a constant flow between me and him. It's so funneling out, like me pouring out, him pouring in, me pouring out, and him pouring in. And that keeps me in that wheel. And I think phrases and things like that come because I talk to him constantly. So like when you're sitting on the piano, I wake up every morning and I play the piano and I sing. And so especially when I'm home, like now I can't do that. But but when I'm home, I do literally every single day. And I sit down, and as it pertains to worship leaders coming up with, phrases or different things like that, I think just sitting down and communicating, I would go with that approach. Like, what do you think about him today? Like, what do you want to say to him? Are you hurting today? Is today a good day? Is today a bad day? You know what I mean? Talk to God, like pray on the piano, like worship, like literally, like pray to him, talk to him on the piano, on your guitar, and phrases and things like that will come out. Like, it's just kind of like just a river, I guess. It's like God, Jesus is a flow, and you can access that river.
I love that. And obviously, better than a lot of people, God only anoints the authentic self. But I think sometimes about what John Maxwell says, he often gets leaders from all over the world come to him and say, hey, what do you think my branding plan should be? What should be my marketing plan? And John goes, look, show and tell works. And when it doesn't work, it shows. And he's not just talking about competency. He was actually talking about character and how your personal private life will always flow through into your public appearances. So I just think that's really special what you shared, and thank you for the vulnerability of that. How though, you're in a season where you're on fire for God, you're deep in your relationship with him. How do you remain creative in seasons of grief, trauma, pain? Like, do you just push through, Dante, or do you just put it to the side and say, I'll come back to this when I'm feeling it? Or a lot of songs birthed out of that broken place?
Yeah. I think like my friend Melissa Hilser, she says that this is this year of maturity.
Whew.
And I just give it all to God. And like, even the bad, even like the things that made, like me losing my grandfather, like that was probably one of the worst, like just the experiences I've had, just because I hadn't lost any closer relatives up until that moment. You know what I mean? My grandparents are all still alive. My mom, my dad, like my uncles, my aunts. And so I think giving it to God, putting it at his feet, and don't allow it to rule your Jen, I think Jen Johnson says, I will not allow my circumstance to dictate my praise. You know what I mean? And I'm going to always worship. And that's my default. So it's not like put that, put it to the side and I'll come back and I'll talk about that later. Or pray to you about it later, or sing to you about it later. It's like, I need to run to sing to you about this. I take the opposite approach. I go into, I grieve, I give God total access to everything. So I'm grieving with God, because even he's like emotional about it. Even he hates that, you know what I mean? And so like grieving with God, I would encourage the listeners, do it with him. If your marriage is failing, or even if you just have a headache or like little sicknesses or whatever the case may be, a big sickness, do it with God. Like, go deep. Like, I used to want to run away, and I realized, like, the first time I ran to him, I realized, like, oh, wait, what?
Yeah.
It was always this simple. Like, I can like really grieve with you and not be like, oh, God's like man, or like, and a lot of people do view God as man. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I need a minute. You know how people tell their spouse, oh, I just need a minute. I need to cool down.
Yes.
I need to go cool down and come back to you later. Like, God's not like man. He wants it when it's at this highest rage. He wants when you're angry. He wants it all. And I think laying it at his feet is a part of spiritual maturity. And it does take time. But as soon as that thing hits, man, I throw it at I'm like, I can't handle it. You can.
Does that's pretty radical as well when it comes to when we sin and screw up, right? Because the first thing you want to do is run away, but actually grace. I love that verse in Hebrews, we're to come boldly to the throne, and we preach that bit, but we don't preach the rest of that verse, which is to obtain mercy. We come to obtain mercy. So like, what you're saying is that in the very moments we think we should run and we're not good enough for God, you're like, that's when you're coming into the throne room, getting on your knees and saying, look, here I am, man. Talk to me.
I know he's the source. he's the water and the well. So I don't have, like, you don't have any other options, really. I mean, really, you don't, you know what I mean? And so it's like, I'm like, okay, I'm all out of answers now and all out of options now. And I know you're the well and you're the water inside of it. Oh. So I need you to provide right now, and not blessings and cars and houses. I've never asked the Lord for a house. I've never prayed to God about an award. I've never prayed to God about any accolade. I've never prayed for a number one. And I was telling the interviewer that I literally have never sat like, God, I want this album to do good. I don't even pray over that stuff, man. I'm like, you are it. I am doing this from you to you, and it's going to be blessed.
Could this be me putting you on the spot? Maybe it's unfair. Maybe you can't even answer it. But maybe that's why God chose you for this particular level of influence, because a lot of people are thinking about writing that hit single. Some are thinking about the royalties that will sort their family out for the rest of their lives. I know it's not holy to say this, but some people are. So you've
Yeah,
never
sure.
wanted that. You've never wanted that, and yet you've attracted it from a humble heart. So
Yeah.
do you think that's why? Because he knew you'd steward it.
No, I don't know why. I definitely have like, I'm like, sometimes when they call me about the Grammys, I was just like, what did we submit? I didn't know we submitted anything to the Grammys. And I didn't know I was even capable of being the first to have 5 nominations. But I will say this, I wrote Voice of God, which is nominated, in my bedroom when it was raining one day. And this was like 5 days, 6 days after I lost my grandfather. I wrote Voice of God, and Stephanie Gretzinger, who's on the song, had just lost her father. And
Yeah.
we had been talking and communicating and like helping each other like through that hard time. And
Mm.
I remember like just singing in my bedroom on my back, on my just, I can hear it when the rain falls on my windowsill. Like the rain is God, the storm is God, the kid, like me meeting up with the best friend, talking is God. This interview is the Lord. This most important thing to me right now is talking to you, and like all these different things. And I think like when you're captivated like that, man, and I never talked about this really with
Mm.
people about my personal like thoughts on me and the Lord's relationship, but like when you're captivated like that, number ones are just the far idea. It's like it's a far idea. You're trying to like figure out what this song is, and this song means so much to you. And I call my team. I'm like, I want to do a music video. I want Stephanie there, and I want to do a joyful song. And even though it's in the middle of a pandemic and everyone's scared to die, I want to do a joyful song. And I'm like, and everyone's like, man, I don't know if we can. Like, we were really trying to find songs that would match the season, all these different things, and what could be. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't want to match the seasons. I don't want a number one hit. I want songs that I had to like grieve through. I want songs that are real and honest and pure. And so when you have, I don't know, I think when me going into it like that, sometimes the number ones and the Grammys and stuff, it's just a far idea. You know what I mean? And if it happens, I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
thank God. I'm like, people are recognizing that this is pure, recognizing that this is good. But also it's like, if I don't get it, I don't care. I actually don't care. I like dressing up, going to award shows to have fun. I don't care if I win.
I love that. And I don't know what something I've noted. I think we've interviewed hundreds of leaders over the last 2-3 years, and every single one of them has gone through something. So you talked about your grandfather, you talked about being homeless, you talked about a bit about your upbringing, but every single person that's been used quite powerfully by God, there's quite a strong story underneath it. And my question for you is, now that you are surrounded by perhaps more influential, let's use that word, influential people than some people are exposed to, is there are there patterns or habits of these great leaders and with great character that you've seen that really sets them apart, that makes you think, oh yeah, I can see why God's trusted you with that, because you get to see behind the scenes a bit more than that your standard person would get to see. So I'm intrigued with it. Obviously, you're not going to give names, but any characteristics of people that you're like, I've learned so much just from the way they live their life and the way I've seen them live behind the scenes.
My pastor, Lau Phillips, is like my biggest example right now. He's just so good to his wife, so
Yeah.
good to his children. I know all of them personally. I have my own relationships with his family members personally, and they privately speak well of him. And that's a goal of mine. For everyone that knows me personally, like actually knows me, like I'm sure there's people that talk crap, but like actually people that know me, I want their testimonies to be how kind and how generous. And that's what people say about Lau. And I love that. And so that's one of the characteristics of Lau that I'm like, man, God, I want to have that testimony that my family can look on stage and see me ministering and be like, my dad actually is like an amazing like person all around. And but not only him, but I would just say like right now it's probably only him. And being in this industry and like you have to really like protect yourself and like who you glean from and who you admire, because even people that come across as great, you know, sometimes really aren't great. So, I really do love Lau, and I'm in his life personally, and the way he lives, and the way he loves the word, and the way he also loves people, and he'll preach about the fear of the Lord. Then he'll also be wearing Jordans and like Alexander McQueen, and I'm like, man, I'm inspired through and through. So I would say right now, my biggest influence is probably my pastor, Lau Phillips. You ever heard of Legacy Nashville?
Is that where Lisa Harper attends? Is that, or is that maybe not? Or is that Henry?
It's it's in East Nashville. It's named Legacy Nashville, and Lau Phillips and Allie, they're the pastors there. And I mean, we have church, bro. We have church.
That's amazing. What I love about that, you've mentioned somewhat, you haven't mentioned the usual names that would roll off the tongue, right? That I'm sure you have been influenced by other people, but you've used someone.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I take little things from like so many. Oh, Michael Miller from Upper Room.
Oh yeah, cool. Wow, yeah.
He lives that life. He is it. And I'm inspired by him so much. I love a man that's just like sure of himself, and just being a man. Like I like when I can see that in someone, and I'm like, I know I'm getting older, so I'm like imagining my life. So like through other people, and he's one of those guys I imagine my life through. And I'm like, okay, when I'm his age, like I'll hope that I'm like that. You know what I mean? But Michael Miller, Lau Phillips, it's not gonna like not your usual like celebrity pastors. And even though like they're like amazing, like I met so many, and they're pretty much all of them have been like incredible people to me, like, you know what I mean? And yeah.
Amazing. Well, a couple more questions, then I'll let you go and crack on with New York Fashion Week. Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
If there was a songwriter or worship leader, musician that got to have an hour with you just over coffee across the table, and there was no agenda, like you could talk about anything, but you knew you only had an hour to sew into this person, what would be the like topic and theme and the main point of importance for you to get across to them? Put you on the spot again.
You know, I'm big on authenticity.
Yeah.
I'm big on self-respect. And anybody that works for me, like my staff, can tell you I'm big on don't allow things to like, and here's the deal, like I guess it would depend on who the artist was, what I would say, but I would definitely say all around, like generally, you know, have respect for yourself. And don't sell your soul to anybody for anything. It's not worth it. None of it's actually worth it. And we're going to all die anyway and like live with God forever. So it's like, you don't want to do that. Like live your life free and pure, and love as hard as you can, like love as deep as you can. But I would definitely tell a new artist or singer songwriter in front of me, do never lose yourself for anything or anybody. And I don't even care if it comes across as like pure, like, oh yeah, we're just writing and we want that number. We're going to get that number one.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, don't lose yourself in that. Do it because you love it. I remember when I first started doing music, it was like maybe a year in, I lost the love of it because it started getting really professional. And
that must be a real thing, like temptation for people, because suddenly you're not just writing the songs for you and for God and for the few people in your life. Suddenly you've got record labels, publishers, literary agents.
People make money off of it. People feed their kids off of what you write. And so it becomes like this pressure from like everybody. And I'm so blessed to have a label like Bethel, who they never do that to me. They never ask me to release anything if I don't want to release any. I can go my whole deal probably not release anything. And that's just because Jen doesn't care. Like, you know what I mean? And when
I know you did a studio version of Champion, which was a bit shorter, but like you could never get the full essence of that song if you stripped any of those parts in the original recording. You couldn't do it. You just couldn't. Could you?
Yeah, exactly. My leadership, Brian and Jen Johnson, are to me like miracles in my life. And I've been so blessed to be signed to them and feel like I don't have to live up to some weird expectation of
Yeah.
success. And honestly, we're all shocked at what's happening in my life because I am more introverted. I do work hard, but I am really introverted. And so we're all like, Jen, bro, like, congrats, bro. Like, but not like, yeah, let's get that number one. You know
Camp
what I
out,
mean?
Dante. Camp out on that a sec, because that's quite free. There's so many introverts who disqualify themselves because they don't think they're charismatic or they don't light up a room when they walk in with their personality. Do you think? Well, before this happened to you, did you think like God couldn't or wouldn't use someone that's slightly more introspective, or is that just a pattern of? Is it kind of people's perception? The quieter you are, the less you have to bring. Because you're really, I mean, if God can do what he's done with you, who's an introvert, I think all introverts should be excited and start believing again.
Absolutely. I have a song on my album called Just Me, and it's
Yeah.
literally about me just having a day to myself because I'm like, I was just telling I was literally just telling Graham, I'm like, I don't want to be alone for a month or so. Like, I actually want to get alone, like, and just like really like focus and all this stuff. But yeah, like honestly, God, I never thought God couldn't use me because I was an introvert, more introverted, because I do have both sides of me, but I definitely, would be insecure in other rooms because I wasn't as talkative or
Mm,
as like, hey man, what's up? Yeah, bro.
yeah.
I hate small talk. Like if we can't go deep, we probably won't really have a conversation. Like I like having actual
Oh,
conversations with people over like food or whatever. I don't love the whole how you doing, bro? I really don't care how you doing. Like kind of like a
it takes
conversation.
energy, doesn't it? It takes so much energy.
Oh, bro, it's so exhausting, right?
I'm the same. I'm a massive introvert. I did one of these tests. They said
No more small talk. We need picket signs. No more.
I did one of these tests. I was 80% introverted, and I spend my life preaching to people. So it's quite fun. It's funny how God. It's almost like He'll use people who He knows will have to depend on Him for it to work,
Oh yeah, 100%.
isn't
100%.
it? It's
Yeah.
like, for example, we'll close in a second, but it's funny even for a conversation or an interview like this. People think it's funny that I would spend tens and tens of hours just researching the person I'm going to interview because there's something in me that thinks I need to be so dependent and ready for this, whereas someone else could completely blag it and probably do a good job, but I personally feel like it's in the cracks that the anointing gets through and is released. So I just think it's really interesting that um, God's done what He's done through a personality type that perhaps is stereotypically isn't someone's first choice, but you just you know it's a great model, it's a great witness and model, I think, and personal example for people.
I think to be a good musician, to be like one of the good ones,
Yeah,
sometimes it's like most of them are introverted, like, because like our job is very secluded. So it's like when you're working on a project, and most people work on their project for a year, usually. It's usually you and maybe two other people, maybe a producer, or you might bring in a few writers, but it's a very lonely thing to create an album. It's a very lonely thing to create a show for a tour. It's a very lonely thing to show up to walk a red carpet. That's very lonely. It's not like, and so I think naturally sometimes artists are very introverted on top of them being known by everybody. And you don't know, nobody in the room, but a lot of people know you.
yeah, same for preachers as well. To
Oh yeah, sure.
prepare a 40-50 hour message a week, you can't afford
Absolutely.
to be you can't afford to be extroverted, can you? You've got to lock yourself away and come up with fresh meat for someone to eat. It's really interesting.
That's so true.
Dante, thanks. Wow, you've managed to fill so much wisdom into 30 minutes. Thank you. I know you're coming on tour in the spring. How can
Yeah.
our viewers engage with your songs, content, social media? It's all going to appear on lower thirds on the screen now, but could you just let us know how we can follow your journey, join the journey?
Yeah, I mean, everything with all my social media handles are just Dante Bowe. And my website, dantebowe.com. So yeah, all of that stuff is just my name. I try to just keep it all simple. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And my final question before we sign off is, what's one thing you wish you'd been asked that the interviewer hasn't asked that you'd like me to ask?
Oh, what kind of sweater I'm wearing?
Yeah, that did catch my eye. I like, go on, go on, and tell me all about it. I think it's the sun on it, but it's just making it look extra classy.
Cool. My stylist came up with this. People think I'm buying all this stuff. I'm not. It's literally just a stylist.
What is it? Is it like, have you got like elbow pads on the side?
It's like a little pad all around. It's like the whole thing is like a Brillo pad, honestly.
It's like you're kitted up for the Super Bowl. It's epic. You got what? All right, very last question. What material is it?
And my pants match.
Oh, come on.
How many people do interviews on screen and wear pants? Come on.
Man, not me today. I'm wearing my Jordans.
You're wearing your Jordan.
I thought I've got to wear my Sunday best for Dante.
Bro, I love those, man. I love those.
Man, thanks so much for your time. You're a blessing, and we'll chat soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you.